Okay, we left off, we had worked this section, and we're just going to continue, same amount. I want to show you, maybe you could actually see the dramatic difference between this side, which has a little bit more light filtering, and this side, which doesn't. This is where you actually see the difference. We're going to do a little bit on this side, a light amount of stipple. It's the same bricking, but this is what happens when just a little bit less light enters into the whole picture. We, the artist, must put a little bit more stipple in there just to tell people what goes on. Otherwise, the effect is lost. Now, the real thing is going to happen when the whole thing is done. You're going to see a dramatic difference. Right now, as you do the artwork, as you do the drawing, it might be very subtle. So the very end is when you really have to make a harsh contrast. The real truth is going to happen when you actually want to do proofs of these things. Let's say I go to a printer and I say, could you give me 500 copies? And the proof, the actual working, is going to happen when you do that. You're going to see a dramatic difference when you see a lot of these done. If it works at that point, then you did it. Sometimes when you make copies is when you see a dramatic response to your work. You see the contrast happening. If you didn't do it, it's going to be too late. So you have to do it at this point. You really have to make it obvious. And I see it already. I guess I've done this so many times I pretty much know what to do. This has got to be like easily the 100th building I've drawn. And I'm going to tell you something. This is a very good building. You get to the point in your life, in your career, when you pick out the buildings that are really going to suit themselves to this type of work. Don't pick out a building that's just not going to be dramatic, not going to work. Don't destroy yourself by finding something that's just not going to work in your favor. Find something that's going to really lend itself to this type of work. There are a lot of buildings that just simply don't translate. Here we go. I'm going to show another harsh contrast. Same brick, same amount of space, same everything, but because the light is just a little bit darker, we're going to show that difference. And I'm not putting a line there. If you notice it's a broken line, the worst thing you do is actually draw a harsh line at a corner. There is no such thing. It's really like a broken line to remind you of where this building comes to a point. And all you got to do is darken up one half and the other half's just a little bit lighter. If you're smart enough and you're able to pull it off, it's going to work to your favor. So I'm really just being very subtle in that response. I'm just making it a little bit darker on this side, the lee side. Now I haven't even addressed things like the area above the windows. I'm going to do that in a separate drawing part. It's a little bit more to it than something I just want to quickly do. Here we go again. I use a broken line to tell me where the actual corner is. And I'm just simply going to darken up this side where the light is not making too much of an impact. I'm going to darken this side up. And this side where the light is entering and causing a difference, I'm just going to put less of it. We go to that point right here where the light is making an impact and simply address it in that manner, just lightly, lightly, lightly. Perfect. and we're going to darken this side. Later on, when we're all set, we'll probably go back over this far side one more time. Even the mortar, we have to make the mortar darker. Right now, we're not too worried about that. We just have to keep it in mind for later. Here we go again. Let's finish this entire area off. Get the ink flowing. Every now and then the ink decides it doesn't want to obey. So every now and then you have to, so, you know, the rapidograph is based on the old fountain pen type of effect. Every now and then you have to cause a little bit of a suction, have the ink respond, and the way to do that is simply do a little bit of a kick like that, and the ink will come to the surface. The trick is not to make it go too quickly. And I remember the old fountain pens, a lot of us had, or if you want to remember, used when we were back in the day and we wanted to make them work. We would just simply do a little, cause a little suction by hitting them or by forcing the ink to come to the surface. I don't think a lot of kids today use fountain pens, so they don't know. It could be quite a difference, though. It's kind of fun to be in control of your pen and make it work. We have too many different types of pens now, fountain pens, and you don't have that same difference anymore. It's too bad. It was kind of fun to have a little give and play. So I'm going to go to the very edge of the building and not make it so dark. I could actually control that. That's fun. It's kind of fun because you could actually do things to dramatize the edge of a building. It might not be exactly 100% accurate. The effect is not that obvious, but you could control it. And it's coming out to a nice point. We're going to darken this far side. We can make that as dramatic as we want. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're really going to work that to a nice effect. A lot of this, even though we want to be as accurate as possible, we can do stuff like use it to our advantage, have it pop. We don't have to be too realistic in the sense that that can't be, it doesn't happen that way. Well, art is the one thing that we can manipulate, and yet it'll look realistic. It's not going to look artificial. And we haven't addressed the fact that we're going to make individual parts of the facade darker or lighter. We're simply just working in an ensemble right now. You can see the effect is beginning to happen. You can see a little bit of difference between the far side and the front side. You can see a little bit of a difference. I don't want it to be, I want it to be subtle. I don't want it to be overt. I don't want it to be obvious. I want it to be very, very subtle. And it's working. We haven't addressed the mortar between each one of these rocks. We'll do that later. That's going to be the last thing we address. If anything, we're not doing it correctly. The mortar should be darker than the brick. But who says we have to obey the rules of nature? The fact is that we could have fun with it. And that's what we're doing. We're already having a little bit of fun with the entire drawing by doing what we're doing, because we're not really obeying the rules of nature in the very nature that this is actually the photograph. The mortar is hardly recognizable. You really don't see it. The human eye plays tricks. We know it's there. I mean, you could see it, but as a rule, it's not that obvious. It's something that the human eye will tell you, and we know, and we want to play it up. It's our little conscious way of addressing something that's an obvious. As an artist, we could actually take this a step further. We're going to make a big deal out of it, just to have people who are looking at this also have that feeling. It's a good thing about being an artist. You can actually help viewers, people who are looking at this, feel comfortable knowing that, yes, we have done, we have addressed the mortar, and see, we're telling you what it is, and you're feeling good about it. It's a good thing about art. We could do that. We could actually help the viewer, our victim per se, understand the drawing, and in a sense feel good about it, and in a sense help us, the perpetrator. We're actually hypnotizing them into believing, yes, see, we did make it the way you want to see it. You can appreciate it. The effect is something you will appreciate and thus respond to. If you're a good artist, you will do that. You'll acknowledge the effect, the cause and effect, and coax the viewer into liking it, appreciating it. It's all the game. We're losing that these days. We don't have the give and play anymore. It's a lost art, per se. All right, this whole section is done, the front of it. I didn't do that because I wanted to show it to begin with. So this whole front is done. Now, having done that, now I could do this far side. I did the windows on this side, and I feel good about them. We're going to darken this side, just a subtle darkness. And you'll see, though, the way it just corresponds, brick per brick. It's working. It's just a tad darker. I think later on, when I really feel good about this, I'll darken up even more. And a really hard thing about this is that you really can't darken it too much. You have to go dot by dot. If you start messing up and making it too dark, it's going to look messy, and the effect is going to be lost. You have to go simple, dot by dot. Don't rush it. The impact is not going to work the minute you start making the effect too quick. It only works if you play within the system, if you play within the effect. The minute you start making it too dark, the entire hypnotic effect is broken. You have to keep it subtle. I think I've done a good job. You can actually see the cause and effect. I like the effect. You can see how parts of it are dark and parts of it are light. It's a subtle transition. It's not obvious. We don't want it to be too obvious. We want it to be subtle. If it wasn't subtle, it'd be a little bit too noticeable, and the effect would be lost. So a good half of this is working. We're going to darken up this part of the facade. We might even darken up part of the framing on this building once we're done. I don't want this area to be as light as that, because obviously it's on the lee side. There's less light entering that picture. So for us to keep this side correspondingly light doesn't make sense. We know it's on the far side. So we have all this done. That goes right up to the window. We're probably going to have to darken up pieces of it as we go along. But I like the fact that all this is pretty much working out nicely. And again, we're going to darken this up eventually. Right now, I like the fact that it's going into this window. We're going to darken up. I could show you a piece of it right now. We're going to darken up pieces of it. Like, for instance, this individual section. And you can see the effect is dramatic. We'll darken up this one. We'll darken up this one. And really make it, we'll play it up. Again, we're still doing stipple. We're not doing anything, we're not making a big deal out of it. We're just doing it by stipple. Very subtle stuff. That's something that's lost in today's market. People don't understand subtlety. They almost only understand something bombastic and loud and obvious. Subtlety is lost. But you can see the effect right here. It's really working out nicely. Once you make prints out of it, it's going to become darker. Anytime you do something, once the manufacturing gets its hands on stuff, it's going to be obvious. It'll fill in. The ink's going to become more noticeable, and even the light areas are going to be more light because there's going to be less ink entering parts of it. But now it's pretty obvious. You can see where this transition is happening. Okay, so we're going to enter this part of the building. Here we go. I want this area to be darker. And the way to do that is just simply put more stipple in. I don't want it to be too overtly subtle, because this area is the darker side. Less light is hitting it. Any time of day, this area is not going to be too light. The sun never actually hits as broadly. Even in the middle of the day, high noon, parts of this are going to be lighter than the rest, but the sun will not hit it directly. Everything is going to affect it from the side, but not overtly. If anything, it's going to be a secondary light will hit it. Light that hits the sides of other parts of the building are going to be cast off and affected, but it will not be direct light. It's fun to notice, to actually study the way buildings are built and see what part actually gets direct sunlight, which doesn't. Nobody really does that anymore. People just kind of overlook that. But having done enough drawings, I actually see stuff like that, and I really take it into consideration when I do a drawing. I really actually see how light's going to affect the drawing. And I never used to do that until I started drawing buildings. kind of a pain because I can't even allow myself the simple art of enjoying a building. I have to immediately think of how would I draw that. Same thing with faces. If I look at a face, I'm thinking about drawing the person. I immediately think about how would I approach it, as opposed to just simply looking at the face and saying, well, that's an interesting face. I will actually, my first consideration is how will I draw that? It's pretty much, I don't know. It's kind of embarrassing. Sometimes you might be in a store looking at the girl behind the register, and you're saying to yourself, and you're trying to be as subtle as possible. You're not trying to be boorish, and you look at her and say, boy, you'd be a good drawing. Unfortunately, most girls will think you're being some sort of a pig, not knowing you're an artist, not knowing that you're simply trying to be honest. So when I look at a building, my first consideration is not enjoying the building. I actually am already in my mind thinking about how I'm going to approach it, how I'm going to draw it, which angle I'm going to look at. Even if it's the wrong angle, maybe it's at the angle that's facing the public, the part that people will see. I actually will enjoy different parts of it and say to myself, gee, that might be better, even though people don't really see that angle. And I've done that. I've drawn buildings from totally different points of view. And it's hurt me because a lot of people will not respond to that, so you got to be careful. All right, we're actually not doing the facade around the doorway. We're going to wait to the very end. I'm looking at the actual photograph I took, and it's just a tad lighter. What I want to do is keep it that way when I draw it. And again, like I said before, when I'm all done, that's the point where I'm really going to darken up sections of it. I already did some of this just to tell myself that I'm going to do that. We're getting to the halfway point of this building, this part of the building. Unfortunately, the actual building itself is going to be pretty boring. The rest of it, like I said, it's the modern part is not nearly as much fun as the older part. And I think most builders will say the same thing. The elder part of a building is so much more fun, so much more intricate, so much more beautiful. And again, a lot of people, the builders out there, the architects will say yes, but the new section is so much more efficient. It's so much more cost effective. It's new. And I understand that. I understand how nice it is to be green, how nice it is to be cost efficient. But I love when they take an existing building and enhance it by adding on to it instead of destroying it. I cannot stand when a building is destroyed. I'd rather see buildings enhanced, added on, created with. That's the way to. Don't destroy. Please, for God's sakes, don't destroy the older buildings. They're too beautiful to destroy. I love when they take a building and add on to it. We've seen examples of that. The New Britain the New Britain Library is a great example. It's actually been added on twice. The existing library, well, I think it was built in in the 1800s. They added a children's library in the 1920s, and they put a connector between the two. So you have three types of architecture which create one building. I think that's remarkable. And in this example, the Plainville Library is a very good example of how not to destroy a building, how to make it more enhanced. It worked out beautiful. I wish we could learn a lot by this example. I wish they would not destroy so much of the past and think they have to destroy it to build new. This is so much better, so much more appreciable in my sense of thinking. Well, we've gone through the halfway point of this part of it. And look how nice it affects the windows. It just really, it acts like a, I don't know. It just acts like a nice connector. It grabs both sections and perfectly, comfortably holds them together. I love it. Now I haven't addressed the areas around the windows. We're going to do that separately. But I just love the way the lighting is kept in place. It's just beautiful. I think when this is all said and done, it's going to look remarkable. And I haven't darkened this part of the building yet. Not at all. That's going to be done gradually. The next time you see this, it'll probably be all done, this section, and we're going to be working on this new section. That's going to flow pretty quickly, because the new section, unfortunately, is not going to be hard to do. There's no nuance. It's pretty much the same. So we're really going to be spending more time on the foliage, individual sections. It's going to be fun. I kind of like the fact that this old section has so much charm.